Then let's do it. Kym, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you as well.
So I want to begin our conversation before we get into your work as a business owner, digital marketing expert, everything that you do by asking you this. 5 years ago, this pandemic shifted and changed so many things for all of us. How much of living through that time period has affected the way that you do business and live your life now?
So, fortunately for us, we actually started before the pandemic. And when we launched, we were remote and no one else was really doing it at the time at the level we were. So, when the pandemic hit, as much as it was tragic for us, potentially from a business standpoint, or being concerned about, what the future was for our clients and our advertisers, we kind of had business as usual, with the exception of all these kids running around.
Yeah.
So I have four kids. Some of the other folks on my team have four kids, things like that. And so we struggled a little bit with that change, but really our infrastructure was already there to be able to work from home. So we were fortunate through that. Obviously the pandemic is bigger than just, our work,
Yeah.
but we were set up in a way that helped us kind of get through that and navigate it. I don't want to say fairly easily, because definitely the kids being home and schoolwork was really challenging.
Yeah.
But we were able to have a better year than we did the year before, through the pandemic.
Yeah. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids. It's career day, and the kid in the back of the room is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you explain that?
So for grade school kids, the easiest thing that I like to point out is that we sell ads on YouTube, because they understand YouTube, they understand the ad that they want to skip. I always joke with my kids, if you skip that ad, mommy doesn't get paid. So let's not do that because we can't go on a vacation if you start doing that. Don't let your friends skip ads.
Yeah.
But it is bigger than that. But that's usually the simplest thing for kids to understand. And it's not that we're necessarily creating the ad, but we're putting that ad there, and we're making it accessible, for our advertisers to get in front of the right audience. For the most part, we don't really target that third grade age, but because they see ads, they understand how it works. When we're watching TV and we see a connected TV ad, we point it out. If we're driving somewhere and we see a billboard, all of those things are really easy for someone in the third grade level to understand. Oh, yeah, I've seen that, and I get it. And it's exciting for them when you can point out something that they recognize or they may remember as an ad.
It's interesting in the realm of ads before this digital explosion of where we're at now with social media, say 10, 12 years ago. I remember the developers of Google were on 60 Minutes. And I always wondered, how do they make all this money? Because they were like some of the wealthiest people in Silicon Valley. And one of the guys asked them, said, how do you guys make money? For the layperson out here, he was like, it's all advertising. And then kind of peeled back the layers. And it's amazing how that business model has totally been fueled off what TV's been fueled off of. It's all about advertising.
It really is. And advertising is tricky because it's not always right in front of your face. And now you see more and more where there's ad placements within games or within shows where now, before in the past, maybe they would put a piece of tape to cover a logo of a car or vehicle, or a soda can would be faced the other way.
Yeah.
Now there's an opportunity to advertise within the show. So, it gets sneaky now. It's a little bit tricky of how advertising is incorporated.
True, very true. I noticed that when I watch Apple TV, it's always
Mhm.
very recognizable that they're on an iPhone. And you can tell because it's usually like if they're on a computer or they're on a phone in like a regular movie, it's like, what program are they using? Why
Yeah.
does it look like Cobalt, some early 80s thing, you
Yeah.
know? Because they can't pay Microsoft or Apple
Right.
for their IO system. Um, so when you were in the third grade, when you were a kid, what was your dream life? What did you want to be when you grew up?
So I actually wanted to be Marv Albert. I even went to Syracuse and wanted to study communications. I loved the Knicks. When I turned 17 and I got a car, I got a Knicks license plate. So I was really big into sports. It was the thing I did with my dad. So I always wanted to be a sportscaster. That really was it for me, and that's what I thought I was going to do.
What's interesting about you saying that? I remember I started out doing sports broadcasting when I was in college in the mid 90s. And I wanted to go to Syracuse because that's where Bob Costas
Mhm.
graduated from.
Yes.
That was the holy grail. And
Hmm.
And it's interesting because at that time, I read the book by Marv Albert. Did you ever read his book?
No, I didn't read his book.
You need to. It's like it goes through. It was before everything got weird with him and all the
Yeah.
scandal. This
Yeah.
was way
Yeah.
before. But if you just do a Google search, Marv Albert biography, it'll come up. And it was really, really good about how he began and how I think he heard the Al Michaels call in 1980 and things that
Mm,
kind of launched a thousand dreams for him. But I remember when I was in college, I went to the first annual sports broadcasting camp at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. And Bob Costas was there, and no one could sleep the night before. We're all watching Sports Center like, oh my God, Jesus is coming and landing in
yeah.
this building tomorrow. And it was so much fun. Dan Dierdorf was there, Joe Buck. No, I think Jack was there. But it was so cool. And I was in that because my whole goal was to be on the set of ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut when I got to
Yeah.
that point, you know? So I definitely
Similar
understand.
paths.
Yeah, it was fun. So, how did you get to this point? What happened with the broadcasting, and how did you evolve to this point as a business owner?
So the broadcasting took an interesting turn because and you may be familiar with interrupt radio, but I went to high school in the city and a friend of mine had an after school job there and I got a job in radio. So I worked for a radio rep firm and we represented, similar to like Clear Channel or Cats Radio Group, like all of these different stations. So I thought I was getting closer to that path. And what ended up happening is they asked me, I got into Syracuse, got a scholarship, but my boss at the time said, hey, listen, I'll guarantee you a job if you stay and sell radio instead of being on radio, or being in sports. Do this instead and you'll have a job. And so my parents, we came from a modest background. They're like, you can't guarantee a job after college. You can't guarantee no loans. So I went to Queens College and then worked through. And so what ended up happening is when one of my bosses was leaving, he was going to start working in the internet. He said, why don't you come along? And I don't even think I was 21 yet at the time. So I was a very early, seller in that space. But one thing that had happened at Interrupt and they were really good at was supporting working mothers.
Yeah.
And it always kind of stuck with me. I was nowhere near that time in my life, but they had a job share program where they allowed moms to split the week, work 3 days. Everybody came in on Wednesday
Wow.
before laptops, before phones, cell phones and all of that. And these women were the most efficient women out of everyone else from a sales perspective, from a cost from their salaries and also how much revenue they brought in. And I thought it was a really interesting model how they were able to have this work-life balance. And we are talking like mid 90s
Yeah.
at that time, 1900s, before all this other stuff. And so as I started to grow personally in my life and get married and have kids and also go up the career ladder, I just didn't understand how there couldn't be that balance. Like that worked in radio. Why can't it work for online? This should
Yeah.
be even easier now. We have all the tools.
Yeah.
And there was always pushback. It's not the way you do it. It's not typical. But I noticed as time went on, I was afforded things like working from home a couple of days a week or leaving early for do pickups and things like that, but not everybody around me. And we started to lose a lot of good talent, especially senior talent,
Yeah.
because of that. So as they had their second child coming back to work, and then you have sick days and all this other stuff that just didn't work for the workplace. And so we weren't like what fit the mold anymore. And I had gone to my CEO and said, listen, you help a lot of people start companies all the time. Help me out. I'm going to take all the people that don't fit here, that don't make sense. And then this way, I can create a space for them. I can create a space for myself. They were going through a massive layoff. And so they laid me off as part of the deal. Even though I kind of knew what was happening, it still hurt really bad. It didn't feel good. And then I got scared because I realized now I'm doing this. And should I just change my mind and get a regular job or go through with something that I kind of promised to do? So, um, ignorance is bliss. I had no idea what I was doing. I never went to business school because I was a communications major, and that was my plan. So it was a little bit of a shock, lots of hard work, but we've grown purposefully. I pray on moms. So usually when it's like you're gonna be in a position where you have to go back to work maybe, but you got two kids and you really want to be there and be part of their lives a little more than a 9 to 5, especially pre-COVID. This was a good opportunity for them. And so that's kind of how we've grown. And we have all kinds of folks working for us, but that tends to be our sweet spot.
Yeah. So do you ever miss the idea that you were going to get into sports broadcasting? Does that ever kind of gnaw at you a little bit?
So here's what's happened now. My 11-year-old sits there and watches the Mets, and he basically does pregame shows, postgame. He has a clipboard and he wears a mic and he talks and does all this. And that's where the little twinges. And
There
I'm
you
like,
go.
I have done it. But now my focus is like living through him. Like, you got to do this. And they have a kids caster thing you can interview for. And constantly pushing him. And when we were in spring training, during February break, we met Gary Cohen. And so he had a conversation with Gary Cohen about being taking his job one day. And so I feel like it's right there, but not for me, but maybe I can be part of it through my son.
So when you get into that idea of nature and nurture, did this just kind of by osmosis become something he's interested in? Was it something that you had talked about to him? How did he get to, because at 11 years old doing pre and post game play by play, that's a big deal.
Yeah. He's always really had this personality where, he had requested a mic one year for his birthday. Maybe he was like 8 years old. And he would sit there and analyze, and he has such a sports brain where he could tell you what date something happened and that person hit the home run then. So it's always really been there for him, I think, in terms of his knowledge of sports. But it's really been mainly baseball and football as well. He's just starting to get into basketball, but it's always been there. I think now, we never want to push them too far where they hate the path we put them on, but now I'm pushing a little harder. And he's a little shy, strange because he likes doing this, but he just doesn't want to do it in front of somebody.
Yeah.
And so now I'm probably pushing a little more to nurture him in that direction.
Yeah. So if you could go back to that time period where you wanted to get into broadcasting and you could interview one person from that era that you totally looked up to or found dynamic, who would that be?
So I guess given the way things turned out, I would say Bob Costas would be
Okay.
the one I would go towards. Just having access to those folks and understanding and I know it's not all it's cracked up to be. Obviously, what we see in front of us is different what happens behind the scenes, but just that's who I would want to talk with.
Yeah. So on your entrepreneurial journey and just in general, who's been that inspiration, that hero for you?
So the hero for me through this all is generally my dad.
Yeah.
And my mom a little bit too, but mainly my dad. My dad is one of those stories where he worked in New York City housing. He started in maintenance, so basically at the very bottom, and he worked his way up. And my dad's philosophy is basically like just do the right thing, work hard, you get rewarded. It's very simple. It's a very simple path. And I remember he used to study for exams when I was little just to get the next promotion. And he was always getting a promotion because he would study, work towards it, and get it. And so I looked at business very simply the same way. You work hard, you do the right thing, the right customer service, and you just put the work in and it'll happen. The fruits of your labor will be there. And then, partly with my mom, because my mom, when she went back to work, I was like in sixth grade, she was on a bowling team and she negotiated to continue bowling on her Tuesday morning bowling team and have this work-life balance like years ago. And she just asked, she just said, like, I'm not going to work for you and because I don't want to quit my bowling team. Like, can I still do this? And they allowed it. And I always find it funny, like sometimes we just have to ask for that thing
Yeah.
that we're afraid of. And you never know. Someone may say yes, and you can carve out your own little thing. And the worst thing that happens is someone says, no, you can't do that. But why not?
Yeah.
So they've been very influential, almost in the background, more from growing up. But along the way, I've had a number of mentors that have been in situations where they a similar business, but maybe they've sold already. So they're a couple of years ahead of me. I participate a lot in the women's organizations where women-owned businesses and that environment because they're really supportive and helpful to, kind of cross the bridge when you're stuck and you don't know what to do next because you haven't experienced it before.
So clearly family is important to you, and you've been very successful as a business owner. How do you balance that every day? What gets you up every day? What motivates you to be the best you can be and to obviously evolve and grow as a human being yourself?
So motivating, at the end of the day, it is family. Being able to be there for my kids. When my oldest son, I lived a different life as a parent because had a different career. I was in the city. I had a before care, I had after school, and I had a babysitter because I couldn't leave my desk till after 6. And then by the time I got home, it was so late. And I really had such minimal time with him on a daily basis. And now I recognize that if I make this successful, I can spend that time with my kids. I can go to their practice. I can be there. I can run the little art project I forgot that was due today over to the school really quickly. Just be in their lives and be able to be at their events because I know how important that is when you look around and you see that your parent is there. And not knocking people that have to have a nanny there, but I want to be there. And so that motivates me to make the business successful and get up every day and make sure that I'm doing my best.
So if you have a dream tonight, run into that version of you that was inching towards that sports broadcasting career before you got into advertising, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've lived, the wisdom you gained. What advice would you impart on that young version of you?
Half of me wants to say just go for it and do it.
Yeah.
Don't take the job, go to Syracuse, go all the way, and just experience like, the metaverse, I guess, of myself, and see how that would have went. So there is part of me, I think, that will always have that. But the flip side would be to get an accounting degree. To just from as a business owner, it's a real critical piece that I don't have. And actually, my son is studying finance specifically because I have hammered that home. That is so important to really understand accounting if you do ever want to own a business. So that would be the practical side, what I would suggest, and also make as many connections as possible. And I really did. I was extremely social through my career and made a lot of connections. But now as I've evolved, so have those connections. And there's like a missing part after COVID where you're not in front of people as much as you used to be to build
Yeah.
those relationships. So I would have probably also suggested doubling down on those relationships and just really meet as many people as you possibly can.
So, of everything that you've done and evolved into at this point and achieved, what are you the proudest of?
I'm gonna see my kids.
Sure.
Even though the business I am proud of, we've won an Effie. We've done things that I didn't do at other companies. We've been on the Inc. 5000 list. It's just wanting to, at the end of the day, look at my kids and see that they're good people. Success is great. Obviously, I want them to be successful and have a family of their own and a home and whatever they choose. But being able to look at them and see, hear someone say, they were polite or they were nice to others, or they're doing the right thing and succeeding, that matters more than anything.
So, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I like to think I'm lighter than I am. I think, life doesn't have to be so serious. We can have fun and, do things the right way. But similar to my dad's motto is just do the right thing. Do the right thing, have fun, enjoy your life, and it doesn't have to be that hard. And everyone's in different circumstances, obviously, and sometimes we don't choose the ones we start with, but I do believe we can choose how we end things.
Yeah.
And that's, a lot of it comes from your attitude and how you look at things.
So, we get off this call, a time machine pulls up. You can go back in the history of the New York Mets and see one game. Where are you going?
I would probably go to the 86 Mets. I used to love Gary Carter, so
Yes.
I'd be there. Obviously I watched it on TV, so I would like to be and I was only like 10 minutes away at the time.
Wow.
But having access to be there for something exciting like that, that would be pretty cool.
So I would be there for game 6 when that ball went underneath Billy Buckner's legs. That would be it.
That's where you would go.
Oh my God. Just I ran out of the house when they won it and I threw my glove in the air like a Roscoe. Like I thought, hitting the ground and doing all that. I was just ecstatic. Um, yeah, so that would be great. So if anyone wants to reach out, they want to learn more, they want to hire you, any of the good business, where's the best place to go?
So you can reach out to me directly, Kym, Kym, at getawayson.com, or you can come to our website, which is getawayson.com. And there's plenty of ways to reach us there. I'm on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to get in touch.
Okay, Kym, this has been great. Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
for your
you so
story and
much.
time.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely.